It was supposed to be a quiet week off, the kind of peace you only find on the far end of a pine-lined mountain road, where cell service drops off and the smell of cedar seeps into everything. My family's cabin had been here for over 50 years, a rugged piece of heaven perched above Crystal Lake. But that Monday morning, peace shattered when a letter arrived. Taped to the door in an aggressive red envelope, it read, "Per HOA Regulation 14.7, unauthorized dwellings must vacate within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in legal action and removal." I stood there dumbfounded, the letter shaking in my hand. I wasn't part of an HOA. The cabin was built decades before the nearest development. But some new subdivision, Whispering Pines Estates, had sprung up down the ridge, and apparently their homeowners association had decided they owned everything in sight, including my family's land. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. So I drove down the ridge, through winding switchbacks, and into the pristine cul-de-sac lined with look-alike homes and perfectly trimmed lawns. A woman with a clipboard and a power walk met me before I even parked. "You must be Mr. Kent," she said, looking over my truck like it was leaking oil. "The cabin up on parcel 118B, that's under Whispering Pines jurisdiction now." I blinked. "My family's owned that land since 1972. That parcel isn't for sale. It never was." She smiled, the kind of smile that belongs in a courtroom. "The developers expanded the plat last year. Your land is technically inside the new boundary. You were supposed to receive a notice." I laughed once. "You mean that envelope taped to my door with 24 hours notice?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she handed me a folder full of legalese, plat maps, and zoning updates that conveniently reclassified my property as part of the HOA. It reeked of a land grab, corporate muscle wrapped in fine print. What they didn't know was who they were messing with. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to read a land deed. More importantly, I know how to dig. I spent that night combing through county records, dusty ledgers, surveyor reports, and archived maps. And sure enough, Whispering Pines' expansion was based on a clerical error, a misfiled boundary that placed my land inside their reach. But the more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about my cabin. The HOA board had been systematically targeting landowners in the area, using dirty legal tricks to force buyouts, fines, and foreclosures. Anyone who didn't fall in line was either sued into submission or bulldozed, literally. Tuesday morning, their so-called enforcement team showed up. 3 guys in polos with laminated badges and a contractor towing a backhoe. "You have 5 hours to vacate," one of them said. I showed them the original deed. They laughed. I asked them if they had a court order. They said they didn't need one. The HOA bylaws were binding. So I called the sheriff. It didn't go well. The deputy took one look at the HOA's papers and shrugged. "Looks like they have a claim. You can take it up in civil court." By nightfall, I'd been locked out of my own cabin. The locks had been changed, my belongings boxed and dumped in the dirt, and I made a decision. They gave me 24 hours to leave. In 24 days, I'd own them. The plan came together fast. First, I contacted my lawyer, a grizzled property rights bulldog named Martin Tully. He'd fought pipeline companies and won. When I showed him the file, he smiled the way wolves do. Second, I found the holding company that technically owned the HOA's communal land, walking trails, clubhouses, and a big parcel they called the Preserve. Turns out, it was quietly listed for sale due to tax debt. Quietly enough that nobody noticed when I bought it. 2 weeks later, I owned 60% of the land their bylaws were built on. And thanks to a clever clause buried in their founding charter, the majority landholder had the right to dissolve the HOA by vote. But even that was just the beginning. I started attending HOA meetings incognito, not because I was a member, but because my lawyer had found a loophole. As a landowner of any common-use property, I could attend and observe. Mark Halbridge, the HOA president, didn't recognize me at first. I sat quietly in the back, taking notes. I learned fast that the board was a power-hungry clique. Mark ran it like a dictatorship, and the rest nodded along, afraid to challenge him. They passed fines for unsightly mailboxes and overgrown fescue, whatever that is. One man was fined $300 because his daughter's bike was left in the driveway for 10 minutes. After one meeting, I slipped a copy of my deed into Mark's folder. His face turned pale as paper when he found it. The next morning, I received a cease and desist letter. It was laughable. I sent one back from Kent Holdings, LLC, warning them to vacate my land, including their precious walking trail. The trail, it turned out, had become their crown jewel, a ribbon-cutting ceremony with local press, complete with plaques boasting about community investment. And it cut straight through my property. So I closed it, literally. I installed fences, posted security, and issued trespassing warnings. They screamed. They called the police. But this time, the sheriff backed me up. "It's his land," the deputy said flatly. "You folks best read the survey maps." The board panicked. Homeowners demanded answers. Whispers of mismanagement turned into full-throated accusations. At the next meeting, I stood up and introduced myself. "My name is Jack Kent," I said. "You stole my cabin. Now I own your infrastructure. Consider us even, or don't, because the vote to dissolve this HOA is next Tuesday." The campaign was brutal. Mark and his crew spread lies, that I was trying to bulldoze the neighborhood, that I was a developer looking to flip properties, that I was an anarchist. They even tried to block the vote, but my legal team was 3 steps ahead. We had homeowners, quietly supporting us, and especially the ones who were fined into bankruptcy. We held porch meetings. We distributed flyers. We showed people the truth about the land grab and how much power they'd given to a handful of wannabe tyrants. The day of the vote came. Tension buzzed like power lines. People shouted, cried, pleaded, and when the ballots were counted, it wasn't even close. 3% voted to dissolve the Whispering Pines HOA. I watched Mark's face fall. I saw the life drain from his smug grin, and I knew it was over. The next morning, I filed the paperwork with the county clerk. Whispering Pines HOA was no longer a legal entity. Their rules, gone. Their power, dismantled. But I wasn't done yet. I bulldozed their front gates. It was petty. It was loud. And it was justified. Homeowners came out of their houses to watch. Some cheered. Some filmed it. Mark tried to get the sheriff to intervene again. But now he was just another resident, and I was a private citizen reclaiming my land. When the dust settled, I stood in front of the crumpled aluminum and took a deep breath. I had my cabin back. I had my dignity back, and soon I'd have justice. By the second week, the neighborhood was in chaos. What used to be perfectly trimmed lawns and robotic waves from porch swings had turned into shouting matches in driveways and late-night emergency meetings in folding chairs on cul-de-sacs. Mark had disappeared. Rumor was he skipped town after a barrage of angry homeowners showed up at his door demanding reimbursement for dues, fines, and suddenly worthless amenities like the community pool, which was now padlocked and leaking. But for me, it was time to apply pressure where it hurt the most, the legal structure underpinning every home on that development. See, when I bought the land under the walking trail, clubhouse, and preserve, I also acquired the easements, or lack thereof. Turns out, Whispering Pines developers had never properly recorded access rights for utilities that crossed my parcel. They'd been piggybacking off easements from a previous owner who died 10 years ago, and that made their sewer lines, electrical conduit, and even fiber optics vulnerable. So I did what any wronged landowner would do. I shut them off. Now, to be clear, I didn't just yank cables and flip switches. I filed notices. I sent certified letters to every relevant agency. My lawyer followed every step of the state's property and utility statutes. I gave 72-hour warning before terminating access, and when the deadline hit, my crew, licensed and bonded, went in and severed the connections. No power, no internet, no running water. Residents who'd once cheered on the HOA's bullying suddenly found themselves fumbling with flashlights and jugs of water from the gas station. Panic set in. Some packed up and left. Others demanded answers from a board that no longer existed. I watched it all unfold from my porch with binoculars and a journal. Then came the lawsuits. But not against me. No, see, I'd built a legal firewall. Kent Holdings LLC wasn't a person. It was a trust, managed by an attorney, funded by a mineral rights investment. And when the HOA dissolved, their corporate insurance lapsed. The community had no legal standing to sue anyone, except the developers and original board members who approved the land grab. Mark Halbridge was about to have a very bad year. Homeowners formed a new coalition, not an HOA, but a class action suit. Depositions flew like autumn leaves. I sent them my records, meeting notes, plat maps, purchase receipts. The whole trail of deception, from rezoning manipulation to coercive enforcement. Mark's name was on nearly every document, and as the face of the old HOA, he couldn't dodge it. But I wasn't just in this for revenge. I wanted restoration. So I made an offer. To every homeowner who wanted out, I offered to purchase their property at 70% market value, cash. No agents, no closing costs, just a clean exit. I figured. Maybe 5 or 6 would take the deal. 23 did. Suddenly, I didn't just own the trail and preserve, I owned nearly a quarter of the entire neighborhood. And here's where things got fun. I hired contractors to strip the interiors of the newly acquired homes. Appliances, fixtures, wiring, even carpet. Then I let the buildings sit, vacant, hollow, gutted shells surrounded by pristine lawns. The contrast made the still-occupied homes look like they were part of a ghost town. The rest of the residents started holding block meetings again. This time, it was about survival. Some wanted to rally and form a new HOA. Others wanted to sell and flee. One guy even suggested calling the local news. I encouraged it. The news van arrived a few days later. They wanted the story. Local man dissolves HOA, shuts down entire neighborhood. I gave it to them, full of old photos, legal records, and a guided tour of the original cabin my grandfather built by hand. I framed the HOA as a runaway regime, drunk on power, and I, the local heir defending his land from suburban invaders. Public opinion swung hard. By the following week, county officials launched a quiet audit into how Whispering Pines had expanded their plat in the first place. I suspect bribes, I suspect Mark, but I don't even need to prove it. Just the investigation alone made buyers pull out of 3 pending home sales. Property values dipped 17% in under a month. And remember that front gate I bulldozed? I did it again. This time not just to make a point, but to clear room for something better. I hired a local architect to design a small lakefront pavilion, open to the public, run by a nonprofit funded by my trust. Free kayaks, walking paths, and a posted sign at the trailhead that read, "Welcome to Kent Preserve. No HOA, no fines, just freedom." It drove the remaining board loyalists insane. They tried to rally support for a new governance structure, but nobody trusted them anymore. I showed up at their secret planning meeting with donuts and a fresh copy of the plat map showing my expanded holdings. Mark never showed his face again, and yet there were still holdouts. 3 homeowners, angry, loud, and legally belligerent, refused to accept any of it. They blocked construction vehicles, harassed my workers, and even trespassed on my cabin property with homemade protest signs. One night, someone slashed the tires on my truck. Big mistake. I installed trail cams, drones, and even hired a security consultant. Within a week, we had footage of one of them, a guy named Jim Gorman, sneaking onto my land with a crowbar and bolt cutters. My attorney delivered the footage directly to the sheriff's office. Jim was arrested for felony trespass and property damage. The other two holdouts folded the next day. One sold to me, the other just moved out in the dead of night, mailbox still full. And just like that, the last obstacle was gone. By the end of the summer, I owned 40% of the neighborhood, 60% of the land, and 100% of my peace. The cabin was mine again. The lake was silent. The woods were safe. And somewhere, in a dimly lit office, a disgraced former HOA president was learning that you don't steal from a man whose roots run deeper than your deeds. You bury him, or you get buried. I chose the latter for them, and I slept like a log.